Language in education policies, issues, and challenges. So, did you know all 193 UN member states and most people are multilingual? It also points out that 7,097 languages are currently spoken across the world, but 2,464 of these are endangered. Just 23 languages dominate among these 7,097 and are spoken by over half of the world's population. So as these statistics show, the soundtrack of our lives and the visual landscape of our cities are multilingual. Languages in their plurality enrich our experience of the world and our creative potential. So multilingualism opens up new ways of being and of doing. It connects us with others and provides a window into the diversity of our societies. And yet, despite the more positive statistics, we are currently witnessing a deep divide. So in here we have the linguistic penalties. This is particularly visible in relation to the most vulnerable groups seeking a new home, refugees and asylum seekers. Newcomers are often required to prove they can read, write, and speak the national language to be given the right to remain. Fluency, however, goes beyond technical ability in the majority languages. So in the 1980s, researchers showed that language is more than just a code by which we communicate. So it is related to social and political knowledge and access to power structures. Language skills are critically important for engagement with the whole society, and lacking those skills can be an insurmountable barrier for accessing opportunities in education, work, and other areas of social life. Success in finding one's place in a new social context, however, requires more than instrumental use of language. So research has shown that refugees pay a linguistic penalty when transitioning to a new socio-economic environment. So that penalty refers to the consequences of being categorized as different or not one of us, on the basis of language performance that does not follow established societal norms. The deficit approach. The myth of one nation, one national language, and one national culture, which was at the heart of the ideal of the nation-state in the 19th and 20th centuries, perpetuates the master narrative of national homogeneity. The consistent and robust evidence that native speakers, a political term in its own right, fail citizenship tests and that the evaluation process is deeply political has not yet produced an alternative narrative. So by projecting a deficit approach onto refugees and asylum seekers, their contribution to society is dismissed, and both their presence and the linguistic diversity attached to it are perceived as problems or costs. This mechanism of exclusion relies on a hierarchy in which not all languages are equal or desirable. So their languages are low on the pecking order that the majority perceive as needed or wanted. Monolingual model insists on a subtractive principle in which one dominant language replaces another less desirable one, rather than recognizing and valuing how multilingualism, by adding the ability to communicate in more than one language, can benefit everyone in our increasingly connected world. So this attitude silences the contributions that new multilingual citizens make to economic growth, social cohesion, or artistic production. So when the motivation for language policy is exclusion, it is carried out through three processes. So the language policy for exclusion, the three processes are: first, we have shaming. So these language policies, often the result of language in education policies, result in stigmatization and exclusion of minority groups. So they were prevalent in colonial contexts and continue to be exercised in many states today. So for example, in Ghana, students who spoke African languages during the colonial times were forced to wear a sign on their chests that said, "I'm stupid. I spoke a vernacular on the school's premises today." Also is that indigenous children throughout the world are subjected to monolingual education policies with the purpose of shaming students who speak these languages. So this is also the case of autochthonous minorities throughout countries and of immigrant children throughout the world, and of other minorities. So this shaming also includes those who speak varieties of language that are stigmatized. So second, we have othering. Language minorities today are not openly excluded from society and education with sticks. Instead, other systems exclude those who do not conform linguistically. So for example, students in the UK and the USA are excluded from educational opportunities when they do not do well in standardized examinations that test the use of standard English. Another example is that immigrants who do not speak the language of the state are excluded from citizenship opportunities by language tests. Third, we have silencing. Language policy often attempts to silence other voices, erasing the power of people. So, for example, the banning of signing at schools for the deaf in the 1880s was motivated by an ideology that oral speech was the only way to pray to God, and thus for deaf children to be saved. And another example is that the Education Act of 1870 in Wales prohibited Welsh children from speaking Welsh at school and required them to learn English. So language has become a tool for social exclusion, right? So here we are also going to tackle the issues and challenges encountered in the language in education policy.
Challenges and issues of language in education policies. Aside from the usual classroom shortage that has become a permanent column fodder, poor attendance and high dropout rate among school-age children is what drives a lot of interventions and innovations in schools. The curriculum, pedagogy, and even the incentive system for teachers and the school administrators. Dropout. The dropout phenomenon is both an economic and equity issue. Economically, dropout means loss of potential productivity, and this will have adverse impact on families at the lowest strata. In terms of efficiency, in the education sector, dropout also impacts the goal of achieving a target proportion of the population having some level of schooling. Dropout impacts human capital formation. The lack of quality, if not the plain lack of it, impacts on labor and market strength on the macro level. While in a micro level, the sadder reality about dropout is to be seen in the never-ending cycle of intergenerational poverty transmission wherein poor children are likely to lead a low-income trajectory in the future. Hence, the dropout phenomenon is a serious economic, equity, and education policy issue that government must address. While poverty appears to be the dominant factor for dropout, a study also pointed out school-related reason for what the author calls school leaving, among them loss of interest and lack of motivation, teacher factor, family and peers inaccessibility, adjustment problems, and school readiness are also factors that induce dropout. Although the dropout phenomenon is more pronounced in some areas or region, it is undoubtedly nationwide in scale and therefore requires a policy action on that level.
So good day everyone, I am Stephanie Aguirre Marsa and I am going to report about viable solutions to the issues and challenges in language in education policies. So the first is speak slowly and clearly. So focus on clearly enunciating and slowing down your speech. Even you are pressured for time, don't rush through your communication. Doing so often takes to misunderstanding and miscommunication. And if that happen, you'll ultimately have to invest more time in clearing up the confusion. So next is ask for clarification. So if you are not 100% sure about that you have understood what others say, then politely ask for clarification. So avoid assuming that you've understood what's being said. Third is frequently check for understanding. So check both that you've understood what's been said and that others have fully understood you. So practice reflective listening. So example of reflective listening is this. So what I hear you saying is. So in this way, we are going to ask or repeat what others say to you. So last is ask what your understanding of this process instead of saying is that clear. Fourth is avoid idioms. Using idioms can make your audience confused. Using these little phrases can leave your audience busy trying to process and understand what was intended rather than staying attentive to the session. Fifth, be careful of jargons. If possible, do not use jargons. Jargons can lead to misunderstanding. Next is be specific. Spell out everything and make it short. Because sometimes mas dali masabtan if it is short, because kung kaya usahay og mutaas na siya, mas magtisod na ang imong kaistorya mo sabot sa imo. So next is choose your mediums of communication effectively. So carefully choose your form of communication. For example, your phone or video conference, emails, and more. So be mindful not to overuse emails. If the medium that you have been used is not useful anymore, then proceed to another medium. So last is be patient. Do not expect that everyone can understand you, and be respectful. So since not all can understand you, especially kanang dayo ka sa ilang lugar, so dapat be patient. Dili kay mangaway ka dali kay dili sila makasabot sa imo. So that would be all. Thank you for listening.
Last one. There is no doubt that multilingualism, the language in education policy in place, has gone through the process of development which can be traced back to 2009 with the issuance of DepEd Order number 74. What this implies is that the basic demands of policy formulation have been met, although we have to caution that compliance does not always assume quality. Finally, the language in education policy in place is not a failure. Although there is some degree of difficulty in trying to answer the black or white question of whether it is effective or not in the absence of complete data and information. So global evidence has been in support of mother tongue-based education as a critical part of high-quality education. So in terms of the links between language policy and education quality, the research indicates that using the mother tongue in the classroom enhances classroom participation, decreases attrition, and increases the likelihood of family and community engagement in the child's learning. So research also shows that using the mother tongue as a medium of instruction enhances the child's cognitive learning processes, and that learner-centered learning has to be carried out in a language the child speaks in order to be effective. So overall, we can say that the language policy's goal is to sustain, reinforce, and expand our local languages and to provide the foundation skills for acquisition of English and other international languages. Most importantly, we need to maintain language policies to ensure the access of minority populations to prestigious forms of national standard languages and literacy.